Look, it's absolutely essential that everything you're planning to do on event day, you've practiced in your training. So that includes every nutrition strategy and your hydration strategies. It's one of the key mistakes that I've seen so many times. And one of those things are if people are used to following a low carb diet, or they're used to following, a very healthy diet, which I hope most of the trekkers are, on the lead up, and then suddenly on event day they think, oh, I'm going to need lollies and jelly snakes and glucose gels, and suddenly they've got this influx of carbohydrate. Their gut is not accustomed to having so much carbohydrate in there, and especially so many sugary foods. And you can just end up feeling nauseous, you can even start being sick, and it really isn't going to help you on that day. So you've got to know what your gut can handle, and you can actually train, this is what athletes do, they train their gut to be able to absorb and take on board the amount of carbohydrate that you need to do a long-term endurance event, and that's what you really need to be practicing. One of my real top tips though is to make sure that you mix up the amount of different types of carbohydrate foods you're going to use. So don't just rely on those sugary sweet kind of foods. You want to mix up the savoury with the sweet. So if you've practiced those things in training, you're going to know what really works for you. The other thing that's good to do in training is to try to get an idea about how much you're going to drink and what you need to be doing to stay hydrated. And if you can practice those on a hot day and on a cooler day, it will also help you to understand how that's really going to vary. So my first ever coast trek was the 100K, and we'd practice lots of hydration therapies. I had lots of hydrolytes and so on with me, and then event day was lots of rain. It was actually quite chilly at times, and it was a totally different hydration strategy to what it might have been if it had been a really hot day.
Chicken noodle soup, which was very good in the rain last year. Going on.
But the egg and bacon rolls are really nice.
Yep.
A special shop in Collaroy.
Well, the week before Coast Trek, in the old days, everyone thought about carb loading. So you certainly want your body's glycogen stores, that's your body's carbohydrate stores, to be full when you start event day, so that you've got as much fuel on board. So remember that your body is always burning a mixture of fat and carbohydrate. So you want the glycogen stores to be full because that's your limiting factor. Even if you're very lean, you've got plenty of fat on board, it's carbohydrate that's going to be restricted. So the goal of the week before is to make sure, come event day morning, your glycogen stores are full. But what you don't want to do is have tailored your training and be eating a whole load of extra fuel so that you actually gain a little bit of weight beforehand. That you want to be as light as you possibly can, of course, on the day so that you're feeling really good. So what you'll find is that all you need to do is keep eating the way that you've been eating, make sure that you're including, and my Dr. Joanna plate is a good model to follow, because then you include a good, what I call a smart carb in every meal. If you do that and you tailor your training at the same time, then you're going to find your glycogen stores are nicely full on event day morning and you feel super fit and ready to go. So what I suggest is having a really nice, slow release carbohydrate breakfast. So on the first year I did Coast Trek, we made a beautiful big Bircher muesli in the morning. So we'd soaked some oats and dried fruit overnight. We added some nuts and seeds, some natural yogurt in the morning. We all had a big bowl of that to start off. A bowl of porridge would be great, some muesli, toast. Really think about something that's a nice, slow release carb that's going to just fuel those first few hours. Then for snacks that you take with you, you've got to think about, one, what's going to be good to take and carry, and you want a mixture of sweet and savoury. My other warning factor is that I can promise you a lot of you are not going to feel like eating. So when you're walking and you're exercising for such a long period of time, your body's metabolism adjusts, and it wants to adjust to help you with exercise. So it actually ramps back your appetite and it won't be cueing you to eat. So a mistake is to think, oh well, if I'm not hungry I shouldn't eat, which would be my normal advice. But during the event, you've actually got to force yourself. We even had, one of our team as a timekeeper saying, on the hour, making sure that everyone had at least something to eat every hour. So sandwiches, crackers, watch against dry foods just because your mouth might be quite dry and it can be hard to swallow. So think about putting some moisture either onto those crackers or into the sandwich. The other big suggestion that I have is have a support crew who meet you at 1 or 2 points and bring you some fresh food. So we had a support crew meet us in the morning with a beautiful big fruit salad with some yogurt, and that was just so refreshing and lovely to have something nice and cold and fresh. on the year that it was pouring with rain, we actually had our support crew meet us with a big pot of chicken and barley soup and some white bread rolls, and that was just fantastic. That was the 100K, so at the 60K mark when we were all dying in our last legs, actually that meal really picked us up, and amazingly we got through to the end. The last thing I should say there are, even if you think in training I'm not going to need glucose gels, I would practice in training, making sure that how you feel when you have a glucose gel. A glucose gel with caffeine can be just the ticket to get you across the line when you're at that last 10, 20 Ks. And have those as emergencies. I've had them in emergencies every coast trek I've done, and I've always used at least one. So it's a really good way just to give you that final lift when you're into the final stages of the event. The last thing to think about then is your hydration. And what I recommend is that you fill your CamelBak with water so that you've always got water to drink, and you sip on that regularly. And then you have a 600 ml bottle that you carry in the side of your pack, and you use that with your Hydralyte. In case of a hot day, I would be having at least 6 little Hydralyte packets in your pack and replenish that bottle all the time so that you make sure that you're drinking the Hydralyte as well as a mixture of the water. When it's on event day, it's really important that you keep looking and watching all your team members. So I recommend staying together. You know, I've seen teams where 2 are going ahead because they're quicker and there's someone lagging behind. If you let that happen, you can't be keeping an eye on each other. And it is highly likely that at some point someone is going to hit the wall if they haven't got their nutrition or their hydration right. Now, what to watch out for is if someone is lagging behind, if they're unable to keep up, if they go very quiet and they're not talking to you. You might even get to the point, it hasn't happened in any of my teams, but it did happen to one of my team members when she did it the year before. Her team members noticed that she was slurring her words, that she was suddenly a bit unsteady on her feet, and they recognized it straight away, got her to sit down, and what was happened was her blood sugar levels had really dropped. She hadn't been managing to eat enough, and she was hitting the wall, quite literally hitting the wall, which means your glycogen stores are bottomed out and you just haven't got any carbohydrate there. So what to remember is you cannot run on fuel alone. So if that happens to you, you must get carbohydrate. So if you notice that happening to one of your team members, you want an immediate source. A glucose gel is great. Get some sports drink or get some of the Hydralyte. There is a little bit of carbohydrate in that Hydralyte. Get that into them. Get them eating again as soon as possible. So if you've got glucose little tablets, something like that so that you get an instant energy hit, and then they need to eat something much more substantial. And for the rest of the event, you have to get them eating at least every half hour, if not every quarter of an hour, because their body's replenishment is gone. So you need to make sure there's enough coming in through the mouth.